All right. So thanks again, everyone, for coming. So we're presenting Bitnation today. Maybe you heard about us before, but I want to give you a quick introduction about who we are, what we want to achieve, and what we essentially offer. And first of all, to get a quick overview over the services that we provide and over why we do this, I will show you a short video.
Before nations, before borders, there was the Pangea supercontinent. Since then, the world has been divided by tectonic shifts, widening oceans, and dismantling politics. Nation-states are crumbling under the weight of local and global challenges that they seem incapable of solving. Rather than embracing a borderless world and increasing personal freedoms, governments and multilateral organizations have overseen surge in bureaucracy, protectionism, and ever-greater intrusions into our personal lives. To prevent a drift towards tyranny, we need drastic change. Pangea is Bitnation's decentralized jurisdiction platform. Using Pangea, you can build voluntary nations, agree contracts, and resolve disputes with other citizens, and access the services you need. This is our vision of jurisdiction as a service, a global market for governance services. The Pangea Arbitration Token, or PAT, is an Ethereum-based in-app token that powers the Pangea platform. When you create a contract, complete a contract, or resolve a dispute on Pangea, you receive non-tradable reputation tokens through Lucy, our AI bot. Accumulating reputation tokens earns you tradable PAT tokens. This ensures that you can't buy a good reputation or acquire it through popularity, but if you earn one, you will be rewarded. Imagine a world where people can freely choose which voluntary nations and jurisdictions they want to be part of. A world where voluntary nations offer a choice of services under their own laws and policies and compete for citizens in a free market that rewards good governance. You too can be part of the future of governance by joining the Pangea token sale. Welcome to the Internet of Sovereignty. Welcome to Pangea.
So later on we will go into the specifics of how the app works that we are providing. It's called Pangea, like the supercontinent Pangea. But first of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my personal background and why I'm involved in Bitnation, why, let's say, I was convinced that this is the solution for many of our problems in the world today. So I come from an anarchist background myself, and I was looking for ways how to, let's say, change certain things in society and how to look for opt-out solutions, let's say, because if you would try to change things through politics, you would just, spend a career through political campaigns and through trying through lobbyism, through many other things, try to change things, but actually you become compromised with your principles. So one idea I had was to, I don't know, like create a new country, let's say, with a new constitution, with a new law system where you could, let's say, experiment with the way society interacts. But over time I realized maybe this is not the ideal solution. And here in this quote, Cody Wilson said, "Increasingly all political questions that we could fight about have been relegated to an administrative sphere, so I could spend my entire career becoming one member of some segment of the government, yelling as hard as I could for many years, making a career. Or I could write software that totally explodes the paradigm," right? So yeah, the idea here is that instead of waiting for the system to change by itself or somehow through voting new politicians every 4 years, you could simply write software that builds a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. So basically the question that we pose with Bitnation is, would you like to choose your governance services the same way you choose your phone provider? Because yeah, essentially in every market we have the choice, you know, like we can choose between many different, I don't know, like car providers, phone providers, or even insurances. Like, we have a wide variety of options, but just when it comes to governance, for some reason, we just have to accept the monopoly that we live with in the place that we were born in. And essentially, we have a geographical apartheid that forces us to just accept the way governance services are provided in the territory that we've been born in. But I will go on more in detail later on. So another one of our ambassadors, Tetsuo Ishii, he said, "The blockchain is not just for money. It's there for brand new governance structures, replacing the nation-state concept from the Napoleon era. Digital nomads like me know that national borders are imaginary. Our activities are global, but most governance systems are still for locals only." So Tetsuo, as a digital nomad, knows that the way governance services are provided, it's not, let's say, up to date with how digital nomads live in a global or international lifestyle, where yeah, people can simply transcend these imaginary borders that we have in our nation states. And moreover, he said, the government marriage system is one of the most obsolete systems today. Marriage is a very personal matter, but it's being enforced by governments, and the laws are so different in each country. So especially marriage is something very private, but still it's being enforced by the government. So why can't people just make voluntary agreements and have it being a legal document and something enforceable just by being a voluntary transaction between two people? Why do we need the middleman? Why do we need the government to tell us whom to marry and whom not, and how we do these things? So this is just one example. So basically the situation we live in is a global geographical governance oligopoly, which we know as the nation states. So this geographical division leads to war, injustice, corruption, and taxes, because yeah, these nation states are competing for power and have the control in their territories, and they try to gain more power, and that leads to wars. As we see in Syria and many other regions of the world today. And these current governance service providers, they have no incentive to improve the services they provide, because yeah, they're in a monopoly situation. So if anyone doesn't like it anymore, they just have to leave to another monopoly, and there's no competition, let's say, in this geographic area. And since there is no competition, they are not interested in providing better services. So a monopolist can basically provide low quality services, and at the same time like, yeah, ask you to pay a lot of money, and either you pay this money, which we know as the taxes, or yeah, you go to prison. So another one of our ambassadors, Pedro Rivera, he said, "I want to create tools that people can use to manage themselves as society. The conventional law-based system is very weak for the society we live in nowadays. People with enough money or intelligence can manipulate and use it against society, as we have seen many times." So Pedro, he comes from Colombia, where we know that, or where locals already know that politics is much more of a popularity contest than actual content and yeah, structural changes and benefits. It's more about really having some people that you like and they offer you free goods, or make, you know, like cronyism, and they ask some people that they know to vote for them. But if you want to really offer services that give you self-governance, that offer you to provide peer-to-peer governance services, you would have to create some software that actually gives everyone the tools to do this themselves. So further on, we also have like two major things in the world that are also part of this geographical apartheid that we live in. So we have the visa system. So people who just happen to be born in Bangladesh or in Zimbabwe or in any other third world country, they just happen to have a bad passport. And they have no chance of working and living in better countries. I mean, they can, but it's a very, very hard process. And in most of the cases, it's impossible because of the obstacles that they face because of the whole government bureaucracy and the way, you know, they grow up in their local economies. And also 2 billion adults in the world are currently unbanked. So these people have no access to our financial markets. They cannot get a loan to start up their companies, to realize their dreams, and to, yeah, basically live like in the more or less same decent standard of living than us. And if you would take these 2 billion adults as one economy, it would be the second biggest economy of the world, basically. And I think this is a very big potential, let's say, for human resources, but also for talent and creativity that is currently untapped and is left behind because of the governance structures that we have in the world today. So another one of our ambassadors, Christoph Heuermann, he said, passports are by no means necessary. Unfortunately, the global apartheid condemns millions of people to stay in their impoverished home countries. My hopes rest in the Bitnation platform, which possibly provides everyone in the world with a unique ID on the blockchain, which could be recognized as official travel document by governments. So I know this sounds very far-fetched to that people cross the border just by having an ID on the blockchain, but eventually we want that people who become world citizens through Bitnation can also travel and even live eventually in other parts of the world, because we are all world citizens. We are all like part of this planet. And what we work on is having, let's say, a new standard that will be accepted universally, like be it in Europe, be it in Asia or anywhere. Like blockchain gives us the tools and the software to create new models that replace the fragmented national standards that we have everywhere, and we can, let's say, unify these standards to just having one new blockchain standard. And this is, for example, what such a Bitnation passport could look like. Here you can see, for example, there's a public key. So it's these 16 digits or letters. And this is like your name, let's say, on the blockchain. So probably most of you know it already, but in blockchain, you do not have to use your real name. You can do everything pseudonymously. And this passport will also have an expiration date. In this case, it also has a picture and a birth date and signature. And on the back side, there's, for example, a QR code that people could just use to verify the hash of this time-stamped identity. So basically, this is something that cannot be falsified because it's on the blockchain, and in order to manipulate the blockchain, you need, let's say, quantum computers or something even stronger. Like by today's standards, it's almost impossible to manipulate data on, let's say, a big enough blockchain. And in general, these timestamps and are very, very useful, I mean, for notarization services. So where we today spend a lot of money and have a huge administration cost for notarization, this could be optimized through blockchains and through timestamping. So these blockchain notarizations, they could be implemented, for example, in birth certificates, in marriage contracts, in childcare contracts, land titles, or just normal business deals. And these documents are accessible at any point in time because they're stored on a decentralized public ledger, and they cannot be, let's say, taken out or away. And you can prove your ownership of these titles at any time, because if you would change anything in the title, for example, a comma, a name, or a birth date, and you would repeat the same process of hashing or creating the hash of this document, you would generate a different hash. So you can only prove that it's the real one by creating the same hash again. So another one of our ambassadors, Africanus Kofi Akosa in Ghana, he said, most of the properties in my country have no titles because of cumbersome processes and corruption. A decentralized land administration accessible to everyone is what is needed, and the blockchain offers that very cheap. Sooner than later, the state is going to become obsolete. So this sounds very extreme, but as a matter of fact, in Ghana, the land administration is not working very well. In general, there's many local fights and conflicts about who owns which property, land property, and the blockchain could offer a solution there by simply offering a legal title on the blockchain and yeah, simply provide added services that the government didn't provide before. But also in general, these people could monetize their land much better if they had these kind of legal certificates, because now it's like very informal. They're just using it for farming, but they could, for example, build buildings, rent land to other people, or even use it as collateral for loans. So there's many things that they cannot do nowadays because they have no legal title for their property, and the same is true for many other things. And to, let's say, prove the market and the idea of all of this, so we already have 60% of all cell phone users in the world, in the developing world. So these people, even though they might not have the best internet connection, already have the tools to access these kind of blockchain services. And already most of the people are using chat services and are using them for informal agreements. So like the black market or gray market's already taking place through chat applications like WeChat, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and so on. And the global legal services market is about $600 billion per year. So that's a lot of money that is being used every year just to solve conflicts, basically. And it's a huge potential to save costs, actually. And what we with Bitnation offer is basically the software, Pangea. So Pangea allows you to create binding peer-to-peer smart contracts through a decentralized mobile chat interface. So this sounds like a lot of buzzwords, but actually what it allows you to do is that by just using a new encrypted chat service, you can just, inside of the app, through emoticons, create a smart contract template, and with the help of a chatbot, create a legally binding contract, which you could not do before because you were just talking, you had no legal security. But here you can create actual smart contracts with, let's say, a jurisdiction on the blockchain that provides this legal backbone that you would never have before for these people who are just doing informal agreements in these developing countries. And also we have the integrated dispute resolution by offering a market for arbitration. So these arbitrators are basically competing for reputation and for customers. And contrary to how the legal services work today, I mean, a judge is basically employed until he's a pensioner. So there's no incentive for him to actually, like prove his credibility or reputation, because he can just, make any sort of settlements, and it may not satisfy the people, and it's a long process. So usually judges take lots of time, and the processes in courts are long and take lots of money. And furthermore, it will be possible to create virtual nations on Pangea, which are basically peer-to-peer services that are provided within a community of people who believe in the same things but don't necessarily know each other, because it's accessed through these pseudonymous public key wallets. So you don't need to necessarily know who these people are, but still it's a way of, showing a new digital culture and like international culture, which you didn't have before. You can have a new form of culture and also national identity, which goes beyond the nation states like mindset that we have today, that you can only be Slovenian, German, French, or whatever. You can be member of, I don't know, of the refugee nation to support refugees, or you can be a member of, I don't know, like a nation that's helps transhumanists. It could be like many different ideas that people want to work on together, and they sort of like create a new culture within these groups. It doesn't necessarily have to reflect the place where they have been born. And just to show you how these agreements would look like on Pangea, so basically you look for the counterparty with a good reputation that you want to do an agreement with. And then throughout the chats, you generate a smart contract template, and you choose your code of law, or you can create a new code of law specifically for this contract. So that's a major advantage of Pangea, that you can actually customize the law that you need. you do not have to comply with the laws of your local jurisdiction. You're basically operating on a new jurisdiction, which is on the blockchain. And you will choose an arbitrator who has an expertise exactly in this code of law. And both of the parties have to agree on that. And you can choose witnesses, and both parties sign the contract. And finally, this signed contract will be notarized through a timestamp on the blockchain. And like the most beneficial way for both parties to operate would be by creating an escrow, where the party who wants a service or a product locks the money in a multi-sig wallet, which means that, for example, 2 out of 3 keys are required to unlock these funds from this escrow. So the other party will already know that there's money. It's not working for nothing. And the other party also cannot just withdraw the money, and no one of the 2 parties can just run away with it, because they need 2 of 3 keys. And the third party to hold the keys is the arbitrator, who, in case of a conflict, will be able to, for example, if there's something going wrong, to roll back the money and to give the money back to the person who asked for something, or to send the money to the actual provider of a service if it was actually delivered. So this is a way to, for example, create law enforcement, even though there's no police. You would think that without a local police force, you could not enforce contracts. But here we have different incentives. We have reputation, and we have financial incentives to actually comply with laws that are created here on this jurisdiction on the blockchain. And the arbitrators are also interested in settling the disputes as fast as possible, because their reputation also depends on it. And depending on their reputation, they will get more clients in the future. So they have an incentive to do these things much faster than usually. And to explain a little bit about the technological infrastructure of Pangea, we are creating ourselves the whole ID reputation system. The smart contracts, wallets, escrow, and the tokens, like the ERC20 tokens and the timestamps, are done on Ethereum. But this is just the beginning. We're just doing this for the first time now. And what we build is a mesh network which could be employed on any other blockchain. So it would be possible for citizens to basically choose which blockchain they like for their contract. So we have a blockchain agnostic approach. Just for the start, we're using Ethereum and have ERC20 tokens for the token sale and for the reputation. And for storage of documents, we're using IPFS, and we're also creating an AI bot called Lucy, which will be also responsible for distributing the reputation, but also for searching these documents on IPFS. So just to give you a quick idea of how the reputation works on Pangea, it looks like a very complex system, but actually you can also describe it like the 3 parts of Pangea. So basically you have the citizens, first of all. The citizens can earn reputation for completing contracts, and by earning a good reputation, they will also earn pet tokens. So it's like these pet tokens are the tokens that are sold now in the token sale that can be financially exchanged on exchanges after the public sale. But like over time, this will also decrease. But I will go more into the game theoretical part later on. So you have citizens that can earn reputation. You have nations that can earn reputation, the proof of collective token, and laws can actually also earn reputation. So the writers of laws, so there will be a market of smart contract templates, and the writers of these laws will have an incentive to also provide better laws, let's say, and better code. So people will like using their templates, and they will, for all 3 of these reputation tokens, you will also earn pet tokens by earning a good reputation. And these reputation tokens cannot be traded. They're fixed on the public key address that you use for accessing Pangea. And the pet token, it's like the master token of all of this. I'm saying it's like, it's not an exclusive way of paying services on Pangea. It's just an option. It's more like an incentive mechanism for the people that by having good reputation, they will earn pet, and therefore they will be able to, by more services, for example. So yeah, what we came up with is this chat interface. Why do we choose a chat interface for all of this? Because we realized that every contract arises from a conversation. We need to pick up people where they are today, especially in developing markets, where people already do most of their agreements through WhatsApp or WeChat. And you should also offer this jurisdiction as a service on a chat interface. And yeah, moreover, we're creating a mesh network called Pantalasa, like the ocean around the supercontinent Pangea, which works both off-chain. So we can, for example, provide people the technology so they can communicate privately without having everything on the blockchain. It goes faster and they have no transaction costs. Like when you would have to timestamp every chat message, it would be very expensive. But it not only works off-chain, but also offline. So it will be possible to do this as a sneaker net, where people just by having access to cable network through a relay or through antennas, they could, for example, within a 20-kilometer radius in a village in Ghana, for example, access Pangea with the smartphones that they have already and communicate, make agreements, and have all of these functions. And every time that someone from this offline network comes back to the internet, it will automatically synchronize because it's built in a delay-tolerant way. So that's basically one of the core features of Pangea. It's the underlying mesh network, which can be employed on several blockchains. And all of this is just the very beginning, let's say, because every government is basically about providing legal security to their citizens. So the same way to have virtual nations, you need to have these legal services. But on top of that, we want to create a D-App store for governance services, peer-to-peer governance services. So some of these applications could be, for example, smart love. It could be marriage on the blockchain. It could be land titles, birth certificates, wills, or even physical peer-to-peer security. Business and cooperation, which Aragon is working on. And I think peer-to-peer security was already like intended to provide by the umbrella. Johan Nygren, who wanted to come today, he wanted to also create a third-party D-App for basic income, or like even insurance services like health insurance, unemployment insurance, education. All of these things could be provided on a peer-to-peer basis on this D-App store, and we will provide developers the means and the API to integrate with us and to just like the Apple App Store, just to offer their apps and to have an ecosystem of governance services. So until now, we had more than 10,000 Bitnation citizens that registered on our website, and that will sooner or later also migrate to the app that we're building up right now. You can already on the Google Play Store download the Bitnation app, or for the Apple App Store for iOS also go through test flights, but you will have to register yourself on the Bitnation website to do that. We had more than 2,000 open source contributors and more than 200 embassies and consulates. So what are embassies in Bitnation? So because Bitnation, you know, is like a virtual jurisdiction, it's virtual nations. So Bitnation citizens basically want to get together with other Bitnation citizens and invite them to come to their embassies or consulates. So an embassy is, for example, a living space where people from other countries can just, or from their place, can just come and live, and according to their terms and conditions. So it's a bit like couch surfing. But they can also come to their co-working spaces and work together to find some synergies and find some common ground for their projects. We had more than 200,000 lines of code on our software development over the past 4 years. And more than 5,000 contracts were notarized on the public notary that we had on the website, which was built in collaboration with Estonia and for the e-residency. And another interesting aspect of all of this is that not only individuals can reclaim their sovereignty, but also entire nations can, let's say, get back their voice in the international community. And by reaching consensus on the blockchain, like get a new voice and more power, let's say, in the whole recognition process for their territory. So yeah, you could imagine that, for example, not only tribes in the Amazonas or even entire regions like Catalonia or even Venezuela, they could use Pangea to basically build up a virtual or online alternative to their current governance system, and partially opt out by step by step offering new services. So we could start just with the contracts, just by doing contracts on the jurisdiction on the blockchain, and then more and more they could go over to birth certificates, land titles, and so on, to become more and more independent of the current governance structures. And yeah, in the current Pangea app that you can download now on the Google Play Store, you will first of all, to do anything, have to create a Pangea wallet, which is for now just an Ethereum wallet, but later on there will be other tokens integrated and also the pet token. And you can choose from a variety of nations and join them just by paying basically 10 cents in Ether. Right now the transaction cost is very low because of the Ether price. And as of now, there's not that many functions, but you can already create a nation, have the public conversation on the chats, and every 3 weeks there will be upgrades on the app, and we will upgrade the app based on the user participation on the feedback. So when you create a nation, you can now already choose from some interesting options. You can either choose whether it's a virtual or geographical nation. You can choose the legal code, the law enforcement mechanism, the type of government you want to have, and the services you offer. So these are basic questions you need to ask yourself, and also to think about the constitution of the nation that you want to create. So it also takes, let's say, a paradigm shift to actually think about these things, because we take these things for granted. We just live, like here in Slovenia, you just have to accept how things are run and you cannot change it. But through Pangea, you can actually start to think about what kind of ideal governance system you want. And further, you can also choose whether you want to seek diplomatic recognition with your nation that you create on Pangea. You can choose whether non-citizens can use your services. And you can choose whether it should be a for-profit nation or a non-profit nation. And just to show you a little bit of the distinct options that you have. For example, for the legal code, you can choose between common law, civil law, or even supranational law like the EU law or even UN law. You can have all kinds of law enforcement mechanisms. Could be no law enforcement mechanism. Could be the ID and reputation that we already have in our agreement. So that's like the preferred law enforcement, let's say. You could have private security, which is enforcing laws in your physical nation. Or it could be the nation-state law enforcement that we already have today, and it would be basically the same laws that we already have in the current local jurisdiction. And so international law enforcement would be like UN troops. I don't know how it exactly looks like. About the type of government, so you can choose between democracy, autocracy, theocracy, or even holocracy. And in the future, everyone will be able to customize this, and with the API, just create their own ideas of governance, which do not have to even comply with the standards governance models that we know today. So it's also like a playground for governance systems and ideas. And for the services that are provided on this nation, it could range from legal services, insurance services, social services, diplomatic services, or even physical services like trash collection, or yeah, I don't know, building roads. So like the very general things that you think that only the nation-state government could do, you could also do them in a peer-to-peer cooperative. And our go-to-market strategy with all of this is basically to kickstart the whole ecosystem by choosing 50 nations that we will support with our funds that we raise from the ICO, and also 50 DApp development projects, and to support them in the whole construction of their services, and to integrate them in much more, and to get much faster user adoption. And our general roadmap for the development. So basically, right now we are here in the first quarter. So we just have the nations and the basic chat, which is a public chat, and it's not the highly encrypted chat that we want to have. Basically, in the second quarter, we will have all the agreements. We will have the arbitration, the first version of the Lucy AI bot, which I have to add is responsible for distributing the reputation to citizens. Because we do not want to have a reputation slavery like in Black Mirror, for example, where people who have a lot of reputation can dictate around other people, and we don't want something like this to happen. We don't want this human corruption element. We want that the AI can basically measure how much, let's say, work was performed to successfully complete a contract, and based on that, the reputation will be distributed. And further, you will be able to introduce the public notary again in the app. There will be the codes of law that you can choose from in the market for laws. And starting from the third quarter, we will see the emoticon function that just through the chat you will be able to create the smart contract template. And nations can create their own currencies. They can create their own ERC20 token and reflect their local economy, basically, of their nation. And starting from the last quarter of this year, the user rewards for reputation will be available, and the public API will be released so that any developer can just create, let's say, add-ons or plugins for Pangea. And it's not only going to be the app version, it's also going to be browser version. So that is going to have probably more functionalities. And people will be able to start creating the apps at the end of the year on the Pangea, the App Store. And just to show, let's say that we're constantly working on this. These are our developers that work full-time on making all of these things that you've just seen possible. And further, we already started the public sale, which is actually about to end in 3 days. And in the pre-sale at the end of last year, we raised about $2.7 million, and the goal for this public sale is to raise $27.3 million, so it would be $30 million in total to be able to basically, what you can see here, provide most of it for the technology. 51% of the ICO funds will go straight into technology, 22 into the operations, 17 into marketing, and 10% are reserved for the ecosystem, like I mentioned before. And the price of the PET token, it will gradually go down until the end of the sale. So every day it goes lower until the limit is reached. And depending on how much Ether everyone paid into the smart contract, they will get the PET tokens paid out. So maybe if you start at the beginning with the first price, and it ends in the end with a much lower price, you will get more PET tokens than you thought in the beginning. And we want to integrate with various exchanges, and we are already in agreements, let's say, with Shapeshift, Bancor, 0x, and now also Crypto Compare and Cytobase. And to round this up, our founder, Suzanne Tarkowski-Templov, she said, what we're doing is making nation-state governments entirely irrelevant. No government, whether democratic or autocratic, can survive without the consent of its subjects. In the same way Bitcoin has transformed the financial systems, Bitnation will irreversibly change the political system and the course of history. And finally, this is the news outlets where we have already been covered, and over the last 4 years of our existence, we have already gained enough, let's say, public attention and media attention to now finally offer the software and the solution that we need to provide in order to make a change. And just to name a few, we've been in Vice, Wall Street Journal, or The Guardian. And welcome to the Internet of Sovereignty. Enter Bitnation, your blockchain jurisdiction. So first of all, please, your questions or concerns, or what are your ideas?
Yeah, regarding identity, if, for example, your phone or your code, your backup code gets stolen, how can you provide proof that you are indeed somebody on the blockchain, but you lost all your data part of your body?
Yeah, so the question was how to recover the passphrase, basically, or the access, let's say, to the whole system when you lose it. And if there's like any backdoor option, how to retrieve that. So I know that in other systems, there's biometrics. There's biometrics to basically prove that you're yourself to recover your seat. But in our case, we're strictly against biometrics on the blockchain because our founder, Suzanne Tarkowski-Templov, she thinks that if you put biometric data on the blockchain, this would actually lead to the next genocide because people could abuse it, either governments or certain groups, to basically, yeah, persecute people based on their race or on other biological data. And in general, right now, we just assume that people are able to safely store their seeds to access their wallet. By the way, Johan Nygren just arrived, the developer that I mentioned before, who works on the basic income protocol.
And identity system.
Yeah.
It's not genetic biometrics, but it's genetic biometrics using means. So everyone on the planet talks to each other at the exact same time. Once a month, you get anonymous IDs, anonymous person. It hasn't been tested. It's an idea.
Yeah, so basically Johan's idea was that pseudonymous users could prove that they're themselves, so that they're individuals, not bots, and also not like two people at the same time, because you could have many fake accounts and try to fake your reputation, right? You could have these kind of online parties to basically have like every time 4 users or 4 pseudonymous users in a room to verify each other. And they could not be in several rooms at the same time. And it's built like a game, so they have to gain points in order to, yeah, verify each other, and it will only last for 1 month. So during that 1 month, they can basically prove for their public address that they're an individual and not 2 people at the same time. And they can also use that, for example, for passports. And I think it's a very interesting solution for the whole problem of having pseudonymous identities, but also being reliable at the same time, because usually pseudonymous identities can be abused for civil attacks, or yeah, for when you, for example, commit a crime, just create a new pseudonymous account. But here in this case, like you would need to prove that you're yourself, and it's like only for 1 month. And if you wouldn't have this token, I guess you would not be taken seriously. But it depends on the market how they perceive this solution.
It's based on an older idea from 2008 from Brian Ford, Pseudonym-Parties. This was offline, and I had the idea to do it online. And some people think it's not going to work because you can't do it online. But I was thinking that I call the points mean points. So you give the other people mean points for giving you means. So you're kind of just socializing. And you can be whoever you want. So it's very inclusive. It's inclusive to pseudonyms. So yeah, mimetic biometrics. It's a new concept. But it's untested. It's possible that I'm just making up. It's possible that it doesn't work. But I think it seems like a natural progression from the idea to do offline, because now we have a net generation of millennials who are so used to using social media always, so why not do it online? Like the idea that everything has to be offline seems to be like a bit of a 20th century idea. Conditioned into it. So I said do it online. But they mentioned it in their paper, Brian Ford. And they thought the security of my system was slower because it's virtual and online. So I think it's safer to do it offline, but then I have these tokens also, so they have a bunch of problems with their offline idea that my online idea doesn't have. Like fake regions and so on. Online, there's no fake regions. And you get a token, a personal token. And it's a new one every month. I call it IP addresses for people. So it's economically important data, but it doesn't say anything about who a person is. And then the idea is that you have 7 billion of those renewed every month, and people would have them like IP addresses. Like Tor, it says you get a new one, and a route them. And then you just route all information where you have to prove that you are one individual through your pseudonymous IP address.
And this is also a service that could be provided not only for Bitnation users, but to any platform, I guess. Like any platform that has pseudonymous accounts and faces this kind of problems.
Yes, and it's been developed as part of the Bitnation project for myself, because I would never have been thinking about those ideas without feedback from Project Pangea. So the original vision was to have a world citizen passport, and this is sort of like a passport then to Pangea, to the internet, but in a very different shape. So you put every single human into government for verifying personhood. So you're giving everyone's employees, government employees, in a DAO, so it's like a.
And are there any more questions about the Pangea technology and Bitnation itself? Yes?
Yes. After the sale, how do you plan to get funded? Do you have planned for some revenue, or do you collect some taxes?
Yeah.
And what is your idea of a fair taxing?
So the revenue model is basically that whenever you create a smart contract template or whenever you create a new agreement, there's a fee. And this fee is first of all the miner's cost for using the Ethereum blockchain, but there's also like a small charge upon this to basically maintain the network. And if you scale this on thousands or even millions of agreements, then this would actually create a lot of revenue. And further, there's these small things like registering for a nation, or creating a nation, or creating a new smart contract template. All of these will basically require costs, and so that's the revenue model. And so it's a very, very low fee, but the idea is to scale it because it's a governance service that everyone over the whole world can use. It's not just for one country that you can only change in one country, but it's for everyone. So you just need to change, let's say, the language options, but the software and the mechanisms stay the same. And about fair tax, so basically nations can also create their own tokens that have maybe a built-in tax. You know that every time you make a transaction, that you would have to also pay a part into the budget of that nation. They could create that if they want to, but in general we do not impose this. It's up to every nation how they see it, and we do not impose, let's say, social principles. We're just providing software. We allow everyone to experiment with these things, and they can also use something that also Johan came up with, the transaction web, where throughout the different transactions, basically there's always a small part taken away that could be used for something different. It could be for basic income, it could be for health insurance, it could be for many let's say, common public goods that these nations want to provide.
Transaction web is an idea that's also for infrastructure for reward-based taxation. So it's not using deterrence, but you're using instant gratification, universal basic income for people who produce pathways. And then if every single human on the planet was producing pathways with every transaction they made, that would grow like a public infrastructure through which you could redistribute resources based on how people are connected financially. And that's very untested. The Online-Pseudonymous-Parties is probably less experimental, which is doesn't matter.
Does that sort of answer your question? Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to, you can come up and talk. If you want, yeah. Are there more questions about Bitnation or about this protocol? Yes?
I have a question. If there were any ideas, for example, in our countries, a lot of people behave good or behave like they behave because there's law enforcement by police or government. How would the law be like physically enforced, for example, that there would be that you could act against thefts, for example, or because if you fraud someone via smartphone, perhaps you cannot because of pre-signatures or whatever. But what about physical interaction?
Yeah. So of course that's like a huge part of the law that we could not cover at the moment, like the whole criminal law system. I mean, we have basically contract law, so it's like private agreements, and it's all voluntary. So just by nature, all of that, there can be no like, let's say, violence or theft because it's voluntary agreements. But for criminal activities, I mean, that's still something that the nation-state law enforcement at the moment is responsible for. I don't know if in the future, like the umbrella or another provider will create peer-to-peer physical security services or some sort of way to solve this. I mean, this is like more or less the partial opt-out, where you can just create contracts and agreements without the intermediary, without the nation-state. But it would be interesting to see if there are models, for example, how to solve theft and murder, all these things, when there's no national police anymore. So it would have to be probably some sort of private cooperative, or like it would be depending on the virtual nation, but also different virtual nations can be in the same physical place. Like they have no supremacy, let's say, no geographical supremacy. Like, for example, for Catalonia, there are several people who created like a virtual nation called República Catalana or Catalan Nation. And they're all basically occupying the same geographical territory, but they have different ideas, different constitutions, different mindsets. And there's no one like right or wrong. No one has the supremacy based on reputation. They can live in the same geographical space at the same time. And they will have to find agreements, let's say, if they also want to deal with criminal law, like how to deal between nations of different, for example, Catalonia nations.
I was thinking, I was playing with the idea perhaps of having few competing security protection agencies, and then they would have contracts between them. So, for example, if a client of one security company would have an issue with another client, then either they would solve it with their contract.
I think it's going to be solved the way it's solved between kings. So when kings get angry at one another, they don't call the police. They are the police. Like they're sovereign. So I think if every human being has more resources, they're going to solve disputes just similar to how kings did. That's, I mean, I was thinking that. Use social coercion, basically. If someone is destroying for someone else, people are gonna know about that. Kind of like how movements self-organize to call out bad behavior.
That's the first part of the question. The second part is how there any idea how this will integrate within the existing countries. For example, I know, for example, all the world has a law against something that I think there should be a law against. So I think there will be a nation inside Pangea that will promote. For example, like if everyone now would agree that the Earth is flat, and talking about Earth is round is forbidden throughout the world today. So, I mean, I would still, if I am talking about the world is round, someone from the police will come and try to put this on, although I'm a citizen of a country that allows talking about this.
So you mean in general the conflict between the local law and the law in Pangea? So of course there's cases where this has not been solved, for example, for the exchange of physical goods. Like you could imagine the case where one makes an agreement and uses his house, for example, as collateral, and he does not comply with the contract, then the other party like will confiscate your house. But in the moment he comes, I could just say, yeah, he's an invader. He's like a criminal. He's going on my property, and I can call the police and say this contract that he has there to prove that he is the new owner is not valid because it's not under the nation-state law. So there's no, let's say, enforcement of these kind of exchanges of physical goods as long as we don't have recognition by the nation-state's jurisdictions. So that's why we also want to engage in diplomatic activities with nation-state representatives. So we're not, let's say, the killer of nation-states. No, we want to evolve in coexistence. It's an opt-out solution, and we basically want to have a new competition. It's something that didn't exist before. We are basically opening up a new market of governance services, which was a complete monopoly before. And now that there can be a competition, there will be also many incentives for nations to, for example, try something like we do, or even engage in cooperation with us, like with Estonia, or possibly with the government initiative of Slovenia, that we could, for example, offer their services on our D-App store as services, and they would get a new source of revenue because there would be potential users of Pangea that would like to use, for example, Slovenian governance services. And they would at the same time have to recognize our laws and the nations that are on our platform. So that would be like a win-win situation, for example, how to solve that. So if there are no more questions, the next speaker can come to talk. Kenneth?
Hello, everyone. I'm Kenneth. I work on the legal team for Bitnation together with Sonia, who's in the background here, and also Dennis, who is Minister of Ljubljana. Thank you for coming. We both started some years ago. We met in Ljubljana. Back then, now Sonia is my girlfriend. Back then, she was the lawyer who got me out of prison for being naughty on the borders of Serbia and Croatia. That was how we met. Today we're kind of a professional anarchist couple, I guess. We work part-time for Bitnation. Our future will be to solve a lot of these questions you have. How will legal matters be solved in the future? But it's a long road. There's a lot of things we have to do before we can get into these discussions even. They're on a level where we're not yet at. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make passports, and we're doing this at the moment. It's a good way to start the project and have something solid, something concrete. We can go to a border station with a passport that we recognize, and we can start cases from there. Some of the things that are on the project is notary services. It could be wills, but it could also be marriage. Some ways of challenging our jurisdiction is, for instance, to claim that we have a blockchain marriage. Then we go to Switzerland, where you get a tax deduction for being married, and claim it. Maybe they say no, but if they say yes, it's a little recognition. And we'll go on like this, creating very small cases where we make small challenges and build it up that way. The legal aspects of Bitnation is complicated. It's history. It hasn't been done before. So everything we know about legal matters don't really fit this model. I guess the minimum viable principle we have for anyone to participate is the non-aggression principle, which could be deducted into a complete legal framework. But this is not anything it's not a criterion for making a state. You can have any base law you want. As Suzanne, our founder, says, you could even have Sharia if you wanted. We don't care too much. I think the non-aggression principle is the basic principle. Do what you want, believe what you want, just don't hurt anybody else. That's the basic of it. What was your question about two people having a trade agreement, right? Yeah. I just wanted to touch it again. because it doesn't have. We have the problem that, let's say I make a state and I sell quality drugs and alcohol, which is illegal in most countries. I would have a problem, yes. But it's always these extreme cases that makes the problem. If I have a state, a nation that could do anything, I could sell shoes, and you're a buyer. We already know, at this point, we could just disregard all other governments. And they won't even interfere in our shoe deal, right? I deliver shoe to you, so maybe I don't, and we have a conflict. We will solve it on Pangea. So already here, we are sort of discarding normal legal frameworks, and we wouldn't even have problems doing it. We would just do our business. The solution of our conflict will be built into Pangea, and we both agreed before we do the deal that this will be the arbitrator should we have conflict. But there's extreme cases, all the cases that is about hard crimes, rape, murder, stuff like that. We can't solve this, and at least not yet. And if you do it in France, you will be convicted in France anyway, and we can't do anything about that. But when it's more normal stuff, business, agreements, wills, marriage, we can go out and do quite a few things with a new legal framework. So in many cases, it's about building this up slowly, starting in the small. Maybe one day we will be dealing with rape, but I hope not, basically. Yes. Besides from doing the passports, we're also getting ready to involve us more in general diplomacy. We want as many agreements with as many countries as possible, of course. But it's slow. So for now, we're joining a few UN projects we just initiated. Several of them are very aligned with the idea of Pangea. There's many countries in the world, at the moment the South Pacific, where UN are supporting decolonization. It's basically taken by the French, right? French Polynesia or England have a few islands. Most of these places, they would actually like to separate, but they don't have the tool. They are not living a good life because they don't have any resources. They're in the South Pacific. Tourism is difficult. It's like $5,000 just to get there. So financial industry would be extremely beneficial in places like this where you have nothing else but people, no resources. So in that way, we can contribute. We can add something new to these islands, which is the criterion from UN for any island to say we will support you decolonizing from France. That is that they can present something new, some new opportunity of doing business. And here the blockchain is excellent. You can come with any other idea they could do in French Polynesia, but they don't have any resources, so they can't do it. But blockchain, boom, they can start doing business tomorrow. And this will be our contribution, blockchain, finances, and Pangea jurisdiction. The combination is pretty good. There's a few other projects we're involved in, starting to at least the UN Habitat project, which is creating the CPI index, City Prosperity Index. It would be amazing for us to introduce Pangea in cities that are being measured by UN and to monitor the progress or development by start using Pangea. So yes, and as I said, we work as the legal team. So this is we're both part-time in Bitnation together, and these are the things we're working with, kind of behind the scenes. But that's our work. Any questions?
So the pretty from what you are doing now, this is more fit for the emerging media markets or emerging lands to set up some prosperity or some sort of nation state. So this is more not that much for the developed world, like Europe, America, where is the legal system is established, but more for the not established nations.
Yeah.
Am I getting it right?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's for both. But I think the benefit is the greatest in the communities we're working with. Small nations who don't have too much framework. We're also working with these Indians in the States who want their own jurisdictions. We even have homeless projects. Our chief developer, Kenneth, he's engaging homeless societies to start using Pangea. They will be incubator projects. People who have nothing can suddenly have a legal framework. They can start making money with blockchain, and they can make agreements with the other homeless people and actually start an economy. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't use this in the States, for instance. They need it.
So in the developed nations, this is a complementary service like Pangea, but in the developing, it is like setting up the framework.
Hopefully, yeah. The whole basis of it.
Yeah.
We're trying to compete, right? We're just doing our thing, disregarding what governments are doing. And it would be great if 10 million Americans would join. I don't know what the consequence would be, but yeah, we have people to help also. There's lots of people in this world who don't even have a passport or a nation to belong to. They're paperless and can't move. It's definitely our ambition to help these people also. By, for instance, supplying passports that would give them a ticket out of somewhere.
Yeah, there are around 3,000 erased people in Slovenia here. Mm-hmm. Slovenia has an issue with non-Slovenians who live here in the 90s. It is, and they were mostly from former Yugoslavia, Serbians, Croats, and the government, Slovenian government, erased them, all of them. They have no rights, and I'm not sure what's happening now. As they did last year.
Yeah, but they were immigrants.
No, they live here.
So they were citizens.
They were just erased. Erased. They had nothing, no rights for employment, nothing.
Yeah. I wouldn't go into the, now we talked immigrants, I would rather not go into the discussion, but because it's in my opinion, a European problem that is very separate. But yeah, people who one way or another lose their citizenship or get stuck in legal frameworks, we definitely have the ambition to assist people like this. So yeah, worldwide in 5 years, everyone will be using Pangea, and the next year will be smaller nations or rising nations.
When it would be possible to test the passport at the borders?
Yeah, that's
very soon. They're in the printing machine.
Within 5 years?
Huh? Sorry?
Within 5 years?
No, as soon as I get it in my hand, I'm going. Boom. This was also what we did for Ljubljana. Simply not caring about prison or anything else, just doing it. But no, it's a matter of a few weeks we have the passports. But for now, we have a special badge, an emergency badge, which is only 15 passports, and in another few weeks we will have hundreds.
So do other countries have to recognize your passports?
We will work for them, because they will, of course, not recognize anything tomorrow. They will reject it, but it's a diplomatic passport. This also means that they have to treat one with respect. It will be issued in compliance with the Vienna Convention on Diplomacy, meaning that any diplomat, part of a diplomatic mission, you have to remember the whole point of having diplomacy is that we don't recognize each other or we have a problem. So it's kind of built into this convention that we have to be able to at least be diplomatic, at least knock on their door and say hello, and they can then reject us. But they shouldn't be able to put us in prison for coming with a diplomatic passport. It's against the Vienna Convention. They can reject us, say we don't want to talk to you, but they actually have to, according to the Vienna Convention, Article 29, treat us with respect.
So every Bitnation citizen will have a diplomatic passport, right?
No, no.
Why not?
Well, you have to be a part of the diplomatic mission then. Your job would then be to contact governments and to make agreements, or in other ways, being part of what's called the diplomatic mission. We'll have a normal passport that any nation who's created on Pangea can rely on, that their citizens can get it. But it will be an umbrella passport for now, covering all nations. Yeah.
Just a trivia, in Slovenia there is this group of artists which are known as group Leibach, and they have their own project called Moje Slovenske Kunst, and out of that they spin off a project called NSK State, and they kind of also issued their own passports, which were done by the same company called Mirage, which also actually makes passports for the Slovenian, for the state of Slovenia. So they use the same materials, and on the outside it was the same level of quality. And it is said that during the 90s, during the war in Bosnia, there were actually some citizens of Bosnia which used those passports to actually cross a border.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that made it true on the other side.
Wow. When was that? You say back at the war?
During the Bosnian War, they were trying to get out of the conflict zone in any way possible, and the NSK State's passport was on such a high enough level quality that it fooled some.
But was it a copy of the Slovenian passport?
It was basically done by the same company.
But did it state that it was another passport?
Quality, just not with, of course, with the same data and everything.
Data.
The Slovenian rock group initiated that to help others in need during the Balkan Wars in the 90s. People who couldn't travel.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just shows that if you don't try, you won't succeed at least. With anything.
But I didn't know about this. It's supposed to be loophole with a diplomatic level of passports. They haven't had such.
No, it's not a loophole because it doesn't give you the right to travel. It only, unfortunately, gives you the right to be treated with respect.
Yeah.
But it's legal to knock on a country's door with your diplomatic passport and say, hey, you want to be friends.
So, okay, so you'll have diplomatic passports and normal passports. How do normal passports will be recognized? Ordinary people will have issues.
That would be up to the holders of the diplomatic passports to make sure that the normal passports could be accepted, right?
It will be feasible within a few years, right? 5, 10 years?
Fingers, right? We don't know. It's up to the world to decide. There's a few countries already that we're discussing with, real countries. Ukraine are interested in making some business with us. Maybe we supply them technology and then they accept our passports. That's the deal we're going to go to them with. So yeah, but of course they're not recognized. But this is our job the next many years to try and make them recognized. At least make sure people don't get arrested for using them. But we're not frauding. We're putting in people's real information. It's your picture, it's your name, it's your birthday. It's not like we're frauding anyone. It's just another ID with your true information. And we just want to travel freely.
Okay, if you become a Bitnation citizen, you still remain in the old citizenship of the country you're living?
I'm from Denmark, and Danish law is that I can't reject my Danish citizenship. They will claim me as a Danish citizen for my life. I don't know about the laws in Slovenia, but of course this is what we're fighting. It would be awesome if we just say, now I'm a Bitnation citizen and disregard, but they're using force in your own country, so we can't do anything about that, right? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Miroslav Polzer. I'm the head of the International Association for the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges. It's a civil society organization accredited to the United Nations and headquartered in Klagenfurt, 80 kilometers away from here. And I'm also working with the United Nations and also with UN Habitat.
Well, let's have coffee. Let's have coffee.
And we will also have on the 7th of May in Vienna a workshop with the Complexity Science Hub and with the Swiss Federal School of Technology, the ETH Zurich, about City Climate Olympics. So I'm interested to learn more about how you think that Pangea could help with this city performance index.
Yeah.
How to track this progress, and because it's a related challenge that we are on.
Yeah, of course, I guess, first of all, by having less bureaucracy, we could improve any city-state. Now, it's actually up to the free market to decide how will this solve problems, because we just supplied the framework. What laws and procedures is going to be put in there is up to the one who creates a state, or the person who wants to engage in a city. He would set up the framework within Pangea. I think some of the lessons of history is that there is no sock that fits all. And the same thing goes with Pangea. If we were too specific on how things should be run in a city or in a country or on an island, I think it wouldn't work. So the specifics of how to help cities would be first analyzing, and this is a good thing because the UN supplies the CPI index. So it will always start with an analysis of what the problems are, and then implementing the opposite in Pangea. But it's not something we could do. It would be arrogant of me to think I could come to a city and just solve your problems. I think it had to be done local. And I think history shows that that's best. There's a limit to how big we can rule upon people. So just keeping the government smaller, having less bureaucracy, and then having locals define the problems and Pangea solving it is the way we're going to go with it. All right.
I'm not sure if this question makes any sense, but for example, let's say, can you make a country that prevents you, once you join the country, prevents you to join another country, or you can join multiple countries?
I'm actually not sure. What is it? Can we? You can join more, yeah.
So, I mean, this is your right in Pangea.
Yeah, because basically, like every nation could provide different services. Maybe you're going to use the health insurance from one nation and the physical defense services from another nation.
I was just thinking, for example, when children are born, and who's going to decide which country they belong to, and what happens when they create their own mind? Will they be restricted by?
We wouldn't restrict anything, and it would be awesome if you were actually the one deciding, right? No matter what.
I don't know, it's a question. From basically, this is for the people that know what they want. Not for someone that has never heard of. This project, basically this is self-contained for the people who want to contribute, who wants to use, who are mature enough to know what they want and what they can offer. Not for I don't know, someone from the streets that goes from 8 to 5 job and then watches TV. So
yeah, I would hope to have the TV guy included also, of course. I think you're searching for our target group, kind of, right?
Yeah.
We discussed it before. It's a little undefined because there's no one who couldn't use it. But of course, we are focusing on what we're focusing on helping is where we see that people would benefit a lot out of it. We wouldn't, in Denmark, yes, we would benefit a lot, but people wouldn't think so in Denmark. They would think that the system we have now is great. So yeah, it's not for the general Dane or maybe the general German. But they also have to see it. There's a lot of mind twisting going on here. People are stuck in the concept of borders and states and their right to enforce their laws. We're indoctrinated with this from child. So I see that many people, they have to really twist their brain to accept what we're saying, right? It's a new world. But I think in time, general people will look at it too and say, it looks good.
I would just add,
I hope it will. It's a question about time, not if.
I would just add early adopters, let's say, for this technology is basically people who already know about crypto because they are like losing the seeds. I mean, this is something that maybe someone from the street or who does the random 9-to-5 job, like maybe doesn't, he's not able to protect his seeds or like his access to the soul world, let's say. So it needs to be someone who already understands crypto technology. But the idea is to make it so accessible that basically anyone who's using WhatsApp and Facebook can also use it. Like really that your mom will be able to use it because we want to like integrate in the chat interface where you can just have some emoji. You can have a heart emoji to marry your blockchain. Of course, this would be done with the chatbot, and this chatbot would interact with both parties and so on. But the goal is really that it will become really intuitive with anyone.
One question in terms of early adopters, who engaged in the pre-sale, so the geographic distribution?
I don't know, like I don't have the access, like we did KYC for the pre-sale, I have no idea like, where exactly they come from. But I suppose there are like crypto investors or people who know about cryptocurrencies.
Is it China or?
We had Bitcoin Swiss in Switzerland handling our pre-sale, and they're actually handling our VC database. So a lot of them are anonymous to us, but Bitcoin Swiss supplied the KYC for the investment, so they're the middleman.
That would be interesting to know.
Yeah. But of course, it's blockchain investors, of course. There might be Chinese amongst them, Americans.
Even though I need to add that for the public sale, US citizens cannot invest because of the SEC regulations. Any more questions?
I have one more question. Do you have any cooperation with Consensus? Because they are somehow, my impression is they are becoming the monopolist in many of these areas. They are also very strongly approaching the public sector, partnering with the EU and with the talks with Slovenia last week at the European Blockchain Summit. So, and also the ID element. So they are.
Yeah, like we know about report and all of this, and it's also interesting models. But we want to be blockchain agnostic because we know that Ethereum also has its flaws, and we don't want to depend on the Ethereum Foundation specifically. I mean, just if Vitalik says go in this direction, everyone goes in this direction. I mean, it's obviously not decentralized. So we don't want to become dependent on, let's say, strong personalities. There should be like a more rational, objective approach to that. If there are no more questions, we can go over to the next presentation. Okay. Sonia, do you want to?
No, I would like to talk with
you. Johan.
Yeah, I can present my ideas and also here. Are this the pseudonym parties? So that's pretty.
Go on, Johan. Get the lollipop.
But, yeah. Yeah. So.
Yes.
So most of it is online if you want to dive into the content I produced. So I had an idea out of nowhere. I don't need this maybe because it's not very big. That one way to, I was working on an idea for basic income long time ago. And one way to do one identity per person on the entire planet is to do those pseudonym parties, where every human on the planet meets everyone else at the exact same time. And since you are embodied, you cannot be in multiple places at once. So that's an algorithm that was invented by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 2008 by Brian Ford. And yeah, then my idea was to do those online. I kind of already said this, so I think a lot of people might have already heard that when I was sitting there. My idea was to do them online, so have everyone on the planet talk to everyone else at the exact same time and exchange memes, and have then positions as authority positions, as government positions. So I think where we're moving is we've had a government that's been we're moving towards including everyone into government. I think everyone into the ruling class, because we have a new labor force, we have technology, so we can free more people and include their cognition into law, more or less. And someone was talking about law, and the word law, it's interesting, or I like to look at what the word means, and the word means rule prescribed by authority. And so you can have a rule and you can point to someone, you can say that's the rule. And there's been a gradual trend of allowing more rules to be prescribed by authority. So at least that's my narrative I usually use. So we had in the Middle Ages, we had fewer rules that could be prescribed by the authority, the king. And then we had the nation state, we had more rules. We had universal suffrage, we had even more rules. So we had more and more people being part of the process of deciding what rules should map how everyone interacts. And there's one of the ideas in the Bitnation space is it's the idea of swarm organization. So you have trails that people follow, kind of like pheromones. Like ants follow pheromones, and people follow their paychecks and they follow their incentives, more or less. That's kind of the model with the nation state. So you have everyone in their, reality tunnels following their incentives that mediate them, and they're being rewarded, and they're going to meetups, living their everyday life and going there and then going back. So I think one idea is to just have more of these trails and paths, so you can get more reference points for coordination. So I think when we think about law, we tend to think about what's forbidden, because the brain is prone to seeing dangers. So we tend to think of law as being a tool to say that's not allowed. But I like to think of law as being a tool for producing possibilities for making connections. So you have the king, and you have the king's the king's jury, and if someone was not doing what they should in a deal, they would go in front of the king, and then that evolved. So I think there's a tendency to see the penalization, which is why it's good to not use deterrence in the system, because the monopoly on violence is a consensus mechanism, more or less. It's doing what proof of work is doing. So it's telling everyone that this is the authority and this is what you should follow. And that's what proof of work does as well. It's a rhetorical force with thousands of computers that are saying this is the authority. Listen to Bitcoin, listen to Ethereum. It's cybernetic. And this idea that it's kind of old. So I'm born in '87. I know maybe some of you are too. So this guy was writing about that in 2007. I was 14 in 2001, so younger. It's pretty simple, because you just all you just talk to everyone else, and you're employed in verifying everyone else. Does that make sense? Like this was inspired by Bitnation. There's a white paper also down there. And I think this is actually maybe a better vision for a world passport to Pangea, because I also like to think of nation states as being computers that run on human brains. So you have democracy as, you know, a computer made up of human brains, and then when you have blockchains, you're taking that and you're putting it on an actual computer. So that's what many miss. Many are thinking that we need to save democracy because the internet is killing democracy. And I think that no, the internet is building a machine to do what democracy has been doing. So it's no longer employing humans into like consensus. And so that's one of the idea of blockchains. But of course, it all depends on that the cryptography is secure and that it all works out. And so, because if you hack elliptic curve cryptography, you can take everything of Ethereum. You control everything, so you're omnipotent if you crack that. Yeah, and I can maybe I can talk a bit more about the yeah, and then you get those tokens, and they're kind of like IP addresses for people. It's also a thing. So should we like? Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, sure.
So for these points or tokens, on which chain, let's say, will it run? On which chain will be saved? I mean, will be also subject to some consensus mechanism.
Yeah, it needs to run. If everyone on the planet is going to verify everyone else at the same time, that's billions of transactions. And the blockchains can't do that because they're very slow. I've been following this project Bitlattice, and it seems to be the natural next step. So blockchains took the idea that you could take transactions and you could take the previous transaction in the next transaction and continue to do that and have a long history with a proof of history. And in Bitlattice, and to do that in a line was, I think, the first idea. So whenever you invent a new type of technology, you're building a simple version first, maybe, and then you're iterating on it and making something more advanced. And so Bitlattice is a project that's moving from being a chain to being a multi-dimensional lattice, which is pretty interesting. So it grows in every direction at once, and it's appending transactions. Proofs of the previous transactions. So it retains the property that blockchains have, that they can easily prove that everything is part of the same state having been played out. But it overcomes the limitation of transactions per second. So that's probably Ethereum 2.0. Probably good to invest in also. So Ethereum, if you bought that, you made a lot of money. Like increased 1,000, 10,000 fold. Yeah.
Can you just show one image of Bitlattice?
Yeah. Bitlattice Ethereum 2.0. So you can, if you Google this, you can find my blog post.
You need to click on the left of the...
Like this? So here I just write everything I think down, and then like if anyone wants to read it, they can just follow my content, like kind of how social media works. And so I wrote a bit here, because Vitalik Buterin, the genius who came up with Ethereum and built it with Gavin Wood, who built the first, I think, client, so also invented a lot of the ideas in the space. He was talking about sharding a long time ago in 2014, and the idea to take Ethereum and pull it apart. And it seems like I don't know this because I'm kind of just making it up, but I think that Bitlattice is making sharding possible by introducing this new topology for the state. So it's kind of not possible to take a line and then shard it into something that's multidimensional. But if you evolve it into a lattice, then I was assuming that it becomes possible to shard it. It sounds that way from listening to the developers they're kind of working pseudonymously at the moment. There's a testnet up and running, and they'll go more public once it's more public, I guess. Or once they have tested some of the things. So that's Bitlattice. So it's storing a lot of more information, and it's able to add things, authorize things by writing them to the state all over itself. So it's growing in every direction at once, like a blob is how I've understood it. And that sounds like, I mean, there's a lot of people talking about we got to shard the blockchain, and there's a lot of meetups and initiatives about blockchain scaling and so on. But I think that this might be like what they're all the talk about that might be pointing towards this. I think kind of like how Occupy pointed towards, you know, we need something, and then the whole crypto scene came and people pointed more to that. So I think this could be a pretty big.
So this is the same idea as the cash graph, no?
Which one?
Cash graph.
No. This is another one. The main thing with this one is that it's a metric structure, so it's a mathematically described structure. Hash graph, how I've understood it, because I saw a GIF of it, an animation, is just kind of randomly linking things based on who makes transactions with who. But I don't know. I saw a GIF. So, but this is one of the things, how I've understood this, is that it's a mathematically described, like a lattice is 2 points and then you repeat them forever. So you have like a beehive or like graphene. So it's very mathematically described. And that property is what's going to make, is what the developer says makes it possible to have chunks of the lattice stored everywhere and then proving their integrity and their connection with everything else through mathematical proofs. And that's, I don't understand that at all. I'm kind of just inspired by it. So he's using wave functions, or they're using wave functions, like how a piano works or something. So it sounds very poetic, at least. And the main idea to use a mathematical structure for storing transaction histories kind of makes sense. So and they're citing Adam Bell, who did work in wave functions and so on. So kind of if you Google lattice and wave functions, you can see there's some things written on it by papers by people who publish under different social organizations, like institutions and so on. So it sounds poetic, and I need something like this for my online pseudonym parties. So I'm out of that. I need something like this, interested in it and talking a bit about it. So I'm a fan of the project. Here are possibly bots. I don't know. Some of them write the same thing. Pretty funny. Yeah, so it's a lattice and it's stored everywhere, and it's making proofs now and then of the integrity by these wave functions and paying people for storing the state. And then there's the idea that you have, similar to how flowers employ bees to spread their seeds. These networks are employing humans sort of to produce the network itself, which is, I think, very interesting and often overlooked and not talked about. These are technologies, they're not human beings, so they're kind of following different rules. So it's kind of like a flower employing bees. So you have a technology of trust. There's the idea of the exocortex that Bitnation talks about also. So you have a technology of trust employing people all over the world using game theory, producing itself as a medium for allocating trust. And with government, we let the government allocate trust, but here it's a rules-based commons is what Gavin Wood calls it. So you can allocate, it's allocated by how people, by markets, more or less, or by choices people make. And so Bitlattice as a technology could be a social tool for people to do things. And I'm thinking that my online pseudonym parties, if you put that there, and you have billions of people conforming to a single state, because it doesn't make sense to do pseudonym parties in 2 different forks, because that's the value of the algorithm is that everyone's using the same algorithm. So I think that's a natural way to get people to align around a single state, because everyone's getting these IP addresses, and you can't get to. It's just algorithmically doesn't work if you have 2 forks. So it's different properties than proof of work. It's just based that there's no value to people to have 2 different forks with these pseudonym party tokens. And that's an incentive, because that's not based on rhetorics or so, but that's based on that everyone can think like, oh, if we have 2 forks and everyone has 2 of these person tokens, that doesn't make sense. Let's just use this one.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's what sort of it's similar to another DLT called Tangle.
Yeah, I discovered Tangle quite recently, because I think everyone probably has discovered a lot of things quite recently, because this world is pretty young. So I discovered it 2 years ago, and I like their Explorer. You can Tangle Explorer. Here. But no, it's not that one. But I think Tangle is just kind of like a stepping stone of people taking ideas, putting them together without having a full, clear picture of what they're wanting to build, but they're finding things that they want to have in it. They want, instead of a chain, they want things to be more spread out. But I think Bitlattice is kind of taking that and turning it into its true form. It's metamorphosis or something. It's like Tangle is like a caterpillar and Bitlattice is like a butterfly. But I just like the project. I don't know the mathematics of it at all. It's just I'm just a fan of it. But so I think Tangle is. I mean, it's just when things are here and then someone is kind of Tangle is like occupy, and then it's gonna manifest into some maybe. Oh.
I'm yours.
Yeah, yeah.
How long do you think will it take to like employ any of this? Because I know that the US, the delegated proof of stake, like even the simple like new blockchain changes are taking years.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
How long is it going to take until like Tangle or Bitlattice are actually on the board properly?
Yeah, Bitlattice is in a public testnet, no, internal testnet already, and Hybrida has been building it for a year and has implemented homomorphic encryption, and there are homomorphically encrypted authority entities that perform the proof of structure. So all sounds very complex, because like, and there's already an internal testnet since like 2 months or a month, and so I guess if you have a year of development and then you have an internal testnet, and you have a developer that, if you read the forum, like it just sounds like a person that really knows all about what they're doing, whereas I don't know that much about computer science as that person does at all. So I think Bitlattice should probably be around like in half a year or something, maybe. Because if you look at an exponential trend, you have Cambrium here, and then you have Homo sapiens here, and then you have Bitcoin in 2008, Ethereum in 2014, Bitlattice in 2018. It all makes sense on an exponential curve. So I think that's what I use. That's my metric. I'm just thinking that something should exist. I knew that Ethereum was gonna, or I thought the world didn't make sense. It was stupid, and then something should be better. And then Ethereum came. That's kind of like how it should be. So I think it's going to be released up and running within half a year, probably.
So you said that we should take a sneak peek at Bitlattice.
Yeah, follow it. Buy tokens. I mean, if it's Ethereum 2.0, it's going to be, and if it can support millions of transactions per second, and I mean, if it's the big next thing, then it's going to be the big next thing. And if it isn't, then something similar should probably come around, because blockchains cannot be better than what they are. It's like first you had the hand axe, and then you had, you know, electric saws and stuff. It's
so basically, big lattice would be more appropriate for Internet of Things.
Yeah.
It is a blockchain right now.
Yeah.
For the number of transactions, you have a toaster and a lot of other appliances and stuff on the it's better.
Yeah, you can use it for that, for the Internet of Things. I think I'm thinking that global states have been selected for so far. So you had nation states selected for, and this is just BitLattice is like a global state technology of trust that any human being can use for anything they want, including controlling a new labor force of machines.
Yeah.
So if everyone becomes ruling class and you have a new labor force of toasters that are connected to the Internet of Things and that are making toast for people in the morning, and you know, lawnmowers, those can all be governed via these new types of mediums that are emerging and claiming to be the future. And no one knows. I have no idea. But if they are, then it's very useful technology, because you no longer have to. Like, people aren't very good at managing other people in large amounts at all. And these technologies are good at that because they're just mathematically provable. But if they work, I mean, if they turn out to be the future. So Internet of Things, you can run on there. I mean, you can just connect. You can run any code on it, and it can control things. So the whole vision for Ethereum you can do on BitLattice. So it has smart contracts. So it's just the next, I think, leap. And I had that. I thought Ethereum was gonna be that big thing without being a good computer scientist or anything, just because it seemed that way from the people talking about it. And that's with BitLattice, the same thing. It just seems like this is people who Ethereum was 4 years ago. But then I haven't engaged in. I was in the Tangle Slack once, a couple of times. So yeah. And on BitLattice you can have those proof of personal tokens or IP addresses for people. And if you have then Pangea and you have a passport to Pangea that you can opt into whenever you want, they're monthly, so you have to continuously renew it, like a festival bracelet, but it's untraceable from month to month. So you're kind of just doing whatever you want, and then you have to remember to renew your passport and talk to 3 other people and also verify them, so mutually. And there's of course the yeah. And then there's also another thing. Before you are paired with other people, you do a selfie video and you send the hash, a cryptographic proof of it, to witnesses who witness the cryptographic proof. And so they're not witnessing your personal data, they're witnessing a cryptographic proof of it. And then they're relaying it to the pseudonym party you're paired with, and that prevents people from changing parties. I had to add that because I discovered an attack. And usually when you do that, you're with a hammer and you're hitting, you know, moles coming up. And someone was telling me I was doing that. So that could point to that online pseudonym parties doesn't work, or it could point to that I'm kind of discovering that it does work through just immersing in it, inspired by Bitnation. So yeah, so the work you yourself have to do is you have to witness other people by relaying their hash, and you have to verify other people, and you have to be verified, and you give out meme points. So everyone has lots of memes in their heads, and then you kind of giving out points for keeping people in people's attention for 15 minutes, so that they're not doing that with others. If it works, it's very good, very like nice protocol, because I think the lifestyle everyone has today, you know, it provides a better Netflix experience, more or less. I mean, people like, and the vision of a borderless society is, I mean, this is very borderless. And you can live society for a year and go live in a bus in Alaska and then come back. And it takes you a month and then you have a passport again. Yeah, so it's kind of rapid naturalization process. And you're also, the norms that govern the society are then basically every single human being. So it's a probably very open society, the online pseudonym party society. So to be naturalized into it shouldn't be that you shouldn't have to conform that strictly to like this or that totalitarian person or that person, because what you have to conform to is every single person. So you have to conform to society, but it's just basically 3 strangers that you have to meet whatever they think is a human being. So you have possibly need to have some kind of language. If you were a human from 100,000 years ago, when we put you in there, you might not be verified because they might not recognize you as a person of their world. But like, I think most people are going to be recognized, like everyone. If you can't speak, maybe you can have like a proof of that from some trusted third party living on Bitlaris. So I think I like that idea for a world passport. And I also like that Suzanne came up with the acronym POI, Proof-of-Individuality. And then the MIT research team, they included that in a paper. So it's very much been created by Bitnation as a social infrastructure, because the original vision for Bitnation in 2014 was to support the evolution of the Web 3.0. It's in the white paper. To have an ambassador network and to have people bringing, speaking about the blockchain. Like the Pirate Party was talking about BitTorrent and trying to tell people that having a global file system is a good idea. And so from that people took a leap and built the ambassador network. I had the idea from my pseudonym parties. It might have sped things up if my idea works. Because otherwise, if it does work, someone else would probably come up with it eventually. This sounds quite, it sounds, and one of the good things about pseudonym parties is that it's the only and first fully pseudonymous personhood. So it doesn't, people have been angry for a couple of years that you have to have a gender on Facebook, so on. And that points to that people don't want that. And if you come up with a system that doesn't have any labels at all, then that's very good. And Brian Ford did that in 2008. So most of the things people talk about that they dislike, we dislike sexism and racism and so on. This doesn't have that because it's just making everyone, giving everyone equal control. So it solves that, which is an interesting property. It takes what people have been calling for and it gives it to them. And he invented that. And I said, do it online instead. And he wrote in his paper, the online version is less secure because it's online. So it remains to be seen.
Are there any more questions? Oh. I would like to do some participatory thing before we go over to the networking. There's also I wanted to ask everyone, what do you think here in Slovenia, I mean for the people who live here or who know about Ljubljana, let's say, what is the one thing that you think that could be solved the easiest through your governance services by putting it on the blockchain? Like, what is the one thing that you imagine right now is like really some problem that needs to be solved? Because like we are an international organization of people from part of the world, and we do not have the knowledge, let's say, to correctly identify what people locally need. And I think that's why we also need local ambassadors to help us to coordinate these efforts so it actually makes sense also locally. So I just wanted to make a round discussion and say, what do you all think? Just if it was one thing that should be done through Pangea, for example, for Slovenia, just as a local via, like what do you think should it be?
Yes, as I mentioned before, Slovenia
some 3,000 people raised. They lost their jobs. That was, I think, 10 years ago.
The early to mid 1990s.
Yeah. And so they lost their identity. But I think European Commission instructed Slovenia to solve this problem. So maybe you can help.
Yeah, I mean, with the whole ID problem, yeah, there's also probably still refugees there, or I don't know. Blockchain also had an initiative called the Refugee Emergency Response, where we provided refugees with blockchain IDs or stateless refugees. And I think, yeah, this is something that definitely could help.
Can you please explain how does it work? How Bitnation helps those refugees?
So basically, they have to fill out the form with some basic parameters like name, last name, height. I don't know. Probably also some witnesses. I think we had the prior system was with witnesses, but now I think we should do it differently. Yeah, but also the ID question is something that's still unsolved. How to also. Johan's approach is an interesting approach to this without biometrics. I mean, just prove that you're an individual, but maybe for nation states, you need more information, I guess.
It's also doing what passports have been doing. Passports keep track of everyone who's in a nation state. And Online-Pseudonymous-Parties keeps track of everyone who's on Pangea. But it doesn't keep track of who they are, just that they are. It's kind of equivalent. Like in, it's people go to get written skatteskrivningen, what's that? Tax. Like the whole the Bible thing, you go to get written, like attested that they exist by that old emperor. Yeah, it's doing an equivalent thing, which I think might be the 2.0. But in the meantime, there's the refugee IDs that are kind of intermediary, because Bitnation is also about it's itself it's a means to an end also. It's also metaphors, and it's also so the refugee IDs they're working in the meantime while the technology develops. It was built on the best technology at the time, Horizon, and then Ethereum came and is better, superior to Horizon, but that didn't exist when the refugee ID was built. So it was using the most advanced blockchain technology at the time. Now it's outdated, but it wasn't then. So it's also about showing the world that it's possible, because that inspired the Online-Pseudonymous.
So basically, you say the core problem is ID for yes, basically people without documents and without identity. And is there any other thing that you can come up with? Like, it could be also not only like this kind of digital services. It could also be like physical things that could be reinvented through a tokenized system. Like you could, for example, invent incentive for people to pick up the trash on the streets, for example. Or you could try to figure out a way how to, I don't know, do a tokenized crowdfunding for building roads. I don't know. Like there are so many things. So just think of any, let's say, government's thing that's you in your daily life thing is not working properly or could be improved.
I believe so certain drugs are not probably classified as in psychedelic drugs, and also part of the psychedelic society of Slovenia, and it is illegal to provide such treatment because of the classification, which is not appropriate. And I think that we should create something that creates a framework for distributing these therapies, because there are therapies also here in Slovenia. It is still precise. Doesn't matter if it's here. So yeah.
So, like, for classification of pharmaceutical products.
Just maybe finding the therapies. A lot of people see this therapy, but can't find it.
Hmm. Yeah, the question would be here: how could blockchain or let's say distributed ledger technologies help? Let's say I think it's also a social problem now. But there's like always the interference, let's say, between technology and social, because also blockchain is in a way social technology, right? It's about creating consensus. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
I mean, if certain doctors agree that it's beneficial for certain states or diseases, I mean, believe their words have something value. This could be perhaps tokenized.
So, like a reputation system or something like that?
Yeah, like a native doctor reputation system.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's like brainstorming, you know, just to figure out the potential of what kind of units could be developed just for Slovenia, for example.
And just for global.
Okay, just one idea, because here actually works in the now you can get a city bike. It actually works because it's operated by a private company. And they need to relocate the bikes too many to the point that not enough. So they come with a truck and people bikes. But maybe you can give an incentive so people could buy the bike somewhere and get something.
So the spaces are always
Yeah, because it works only here in Ljubljana. The private company works in this. Other cities they failed in these public bikes because the network was never properly sustained.
They also have like free bikes or something? Or?
Yeah, this is
€3.
Yeah. But they are shitty bikes. but they work, yeah.
So here it's about the distribution of the infrastructure of bikes.
Yeah, maybe the idea, because I see that they come with trucks and they need to relocate from one point to the other. This could be done, maybe giving incentive to people
to pick them up and bring them back.
Yeah, maybe network can say if you bring the bike here, you will get some tokens.
Yeah. Basically, also like social token, I guess, like do goods. I mean, just for the public good.
Yeah.
It could work just as finance some other commodities. I was thinking about umbrella exchange on a rainy day. You know, you have let's say every few some distance there will be a sort of let's say a ledger or something with 10 umbrellas that you could borrow.
I saw it from you.
What are they exchanging? Umbrellas. You take one out of a holder, you pay them, and then you bring them back.
Yeah, there's one bike.
It's in your umbrellas.
When it's raining, they run out.
But they need to be tracked, right?
Tracked?
Yeah.
I don't think they are. It's like shitty €2.
I mean, in Japan, the crime level is so low that supposedly, if you leave like a bunch of banknotes on the walkway, they just stay there. Nobody really moves them.
One idea I just came in my mind because I don't follow the politics much, so I don't know what people need. But in my case, and what I've seen that is very poorly dealt with is the theft of bikes, bicycles, for example. Something that I think it should I don't know, for me, punishments should be, I don't know, you just don't steal another person's bike. It's not like for that emergency.
I'm not bark, my bark.
Really, I mean, it's so much bicycles are stolen in Ljubljana. It's impossible. I mean, actually, there are people I know. One of my friends who got the same bike stolen twice. He knows a guy, a homeless guy, who knows people who steal bikes. And it's just some community somewhere where this has no go. They have, you know, bikes, and then you just pay to this middleman, you pay the ransom money, and they just leave it somewhere in some bush. If you really want it back. Otherwise, they will just sell it or parcel it. And it's something, I don't know, I've seen some YouTube videos of an effective method that some sheriff in USA started. I think they just they made a lot of ads that every bike could be a trapped bike, and they were randomly putting trapped bikes on the street, and they were monitoring it. And when someone tried to steal it, they just do it online, and everyone could see who is the bike. So it made the thieves think about supporting this bike here. It's just too good to be true. Perhaps it's.
Yeah, but on the other side, you need more video surveillance in the public.
Or not, you know, because you just need the thieves to perceive that what this this thing is trapped.
It's like panopticon. Panopticon that you might, there is a possibility you might be watched, but you're not sure if you're the one being watched. But you're not sure if you're not. Like, you might be or might be not.
Okay.
It's a term that like there is a prison and cells, and there is a guard on top, and he has capacity to see everybody, but not everybody at the same time. So and the prisoners don't know at which time slot he's watching them.
I mean, this has story that there are like 10 professional thieves in Ljubljana. And there are 2,000 people whose bikes are stolen. In a democracy, there will be a law or a referendum or something.
I think the solution to that could be the same to that for the others to bring back the bikes. It could be some RFID chip that is in the bikes, and it could be tracked. It could be timestamp the location, like geotagging. So the same mechanism that you could use to like prove that someone, for example, brought back the bike, you could also use that to track the bike when it's stolen.
That's one thing.
So when you know that every bike has this kind of RFID chip inside, then maybe you would be also more paranoid that they will find you.
Okay, and then there are numerous other issues in the city, like accessibility for people with disabilities, you know. But you would have a group of people just walking around, testing the ground. Like, if I was on, let's say, on a wheelchair, on a leg, or a wheelchair, like, I could not pass here, so like, tag it, snap it, and maybe for let's say, for ecological issues, like, there's, again, this trash is again full, you know, like, snap it, upload it, and tag it as an emergency, like equal emergency. There is a leak of oil, let's say, in some area, tag it, and it's an emergency so that it gets resolved. Once it's resolved, someone with capacity to solve this issue can claim it and upload a resolve, and when it's resolved, he could get rewarded from the pool of rewards. So there was a certain project of this type already in Slovenia, but just for the ecological purposes. But that faltered away after 1 or 2 years. A basic Google map with Thanks.
So you're talking about this. But this is perfect case for like software projects, you know. Like we have the t-shirts that called push, you know. Why nobody is doing this? It's using blockchain.
It's lack of incentives. I mean, they always say, okay, I need some time to sleep. I need some activity that pays me, so I can support myself and maybe someone besides myself. And since none of the really useful stuff in this world is the one that brings money, usually it's all the useless stuff, like it's kind of a weird feeling, but that's how it is, you know. Let's say the most useful jobs are like the cleaner, you know, and he gets to be paid minimum, while the most destructive job, like banker, you know, socially destructive, he gets to get premium, you know. So there is this balance of fairness. Actually, we could even have a system of pool of reward money and just throw a tip or vote for a tip for someone in the civil society that does positive effect of society. Just not tipping your own money, but tipping money from the weekly or monthly pool. Money from some other source, public money. Just tip that guy, you know, like guy that helps elderly across the street, or guy that helps.
Or a software developer that makes something useful for the community and not works for IBM.
Like, this is almost brings us up to the bounty system for public good. But it's still there's always an issue of who would fund or who would provide funding.
Oh, Taxims can do that also, maybe.
Taxims actually could provide that.
But that's just an idea also. But it's if every human on the planet is employed to produce pathways with every transaction they make, they have that infrastructure, the transaction web. And then you can also, through that, you can spread trends for how to pay taxes and distribute it, that I call taxes. But I mean, this has not been simulated. So, and Online-Pseudonymous-Parties was invented for that. But you have, you basically, similar to how genes or memes spread to trends, everyone has been absorbing trends throughout their lives to get more partners, get laid. You absorb trends. And similar with taxims, you would be absorbing and spreading taxims through consumption networks. And they would then, there would be like, if you live where there's a lot of snow, that network would select taxims to manage maybe the snow in the winter. So taxims would automatically, they would be programmable and spread via transactions. Yeah. That's like an idea for like very far out how you could get funds for public services. You just take the current thing that we're using, taxes, and then you kind of evolve it. And it also follows the non-aggression principle, but it's also even more than, it's also,
I'm just going to say goodbye. Thank you for your attention. We have a long drive home. Getting my fancy clothing back on.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. So taxims could be one way, or like that could be one vision for how could we possibly manage this very complex problem of getting money where it needs to be. Because it's not, one way to manage it is by employing everyone into selecting for how to do it, but using swarm organization. But I need to build Online-Pseudonymous-Parties first.
I just wanted to summarize, let's say, the problems that we just identified, let's say. So first of all, the people without identity from the 90s, that were left over of the war and had no chance to be employed or to participate in general city life.
the reputation system for the doctors, I guess, right? Like for the classification of pharmaceuticals for the drugs. Then we had the problem of the to bring back the city bikes and to also track or to stop people from stealing bikes, and disabled people, right? The help for disabled people, right? So if you have no more questions, I guess we can just go over to take some food and yeah, do something. Great. Thanks for your attention.
Selko.
We finally meet after.
Yeah, it took me a while to recognize you.
I'm so proud.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, you're drawing on